Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, we are continuing to talk about the executive branch by talking about the concept of unitary executive, which focuses on the president's control over the entire executive branch of the government. This is important because we need to understand how much power a president has to operate the executive branch. In the previous video, we talked about presidential pardons and noted that the main issue with the pardon powers was the vagueness in the Constitution about the scope of them. For this video, we will see that vagueness problem with the unitary executive concept where a president can make the most out of these powers without much restrictions. Let's start with the framers figuring out what powers the president should have. Within 2 weeks of getting to work, the framers agreed that the country should have only one president at a time. They agreed his job would be to implement whatever laws get passed with some help. The framers had to think about who would select the officers to help the president or the legislature. The framers did not answer that question for another 3 months. The framers had to first decide what powers each branch of government in the United States should have and how those powers should check and balance each other. One framer thought the Senate should have a say in choosing the key players in the executive branch. If the president has sole power over appointments, they might choose people personally aligned or allied to him, such as relatives, friends, or business partners. Such people would do whatever the president demanded. An independent and public-spirited Senate, on the other hand, would ensure a staff committed to what is best for the public. The framers put together a combination of these ideas. They said, quote, the president will have the ability to nominate those who work for him, but high-ranking officials won't be appointed without the advice and consent of the Senate. Furthermore, Congress will decide what offices to establish, unquote. However, they later presumed the president would fill those. In their rush to get out the door, though, the framers neglected to consider how could the president dismiss someone they had appointed? Could they fire the person themselves, or did the Senate have to approve the removal? So, in 1789, during a crisis early in George Washington's first term, Congress made the decision that the framers had ignored. They decided to establish departments to help run the government. The heads of these departments would become the president's cabinet. The House of Representatives considered a bill creating the Department of Foreign Affairs. Today, it is called the State Department. It would be led by a secretary who would be removable from office by the president. It sounds simple enough. However, since the Senate is involved in appointments, some framers thought it should approve or disapprove dismissals as well. Other framers thought the Electoral College would guarantee upstanding presidents and they would never fire someone without good reason. The issue at stake was the power of the presidency versus the power of the legislature. The House voted to let the president alone remove appointees. The Senate tied 10-10. As president of the Senate, Vice President John Adams broke the tie. From then on, with brief exception, the president has had the sole right to fire officials in the executive branch. So, this all means that the legislative branch, specifically the Senate, has a role in confirming any nominees the president makes for the cabinet, but the Senate does not have any role in confirming any firings the president wants to make to the cabinet official. As you can tell, there is a check from the Senate on putting in the president's nominees, but no check from the Senate on approving or disapproving the president wanting to remove a cabinet official. Keep in mind that the framers were aware that a president might fire someone to protect themselves rather than the country, and Congress would be hindered from stopping the firing. But the framers could not have planned for how big the executive branch would grow in the centuries to come. Like the chief executive officer of a business, the president is the CEO of the executive branch. As a boss can hire and fire employees, presidents have the right to hire, with Senate approval, high-level officials to undertake their policies. And while laws protect employees from being fired because of race, gender, or age, presidents can get rid of someone who does not do a good job or who undermines them. This system of an executive branch led by a single person at the top who oversees major employees below is called a unitary executive. Because the executive chooses the underlinings and does not have to get permission before firing them, the president has a lot of power. In 1867, President Andrew Johnson feuded with his Secretary of War Edwin Stanton over Reconstruction policies. Concerned that Johnson would get rid of Stanton, the 36th Congress undid the decision of the first Congress by passing the Tenure of Office Act. It was a law that the president must get Senate approval before kicking out certain office holders. Johnson fired Stanton anyway. So the House moved to impeach the president. Johnson was saved by one vote in the Senate. The act, which many lawyers considered unconstitutional to begin with, was repealed in 1887. After a century on the hiring side, many Americans were appalled when President John F. Kennedy nominated Robert F. Kennedy for Attorney General. As head of the Department of Justice, the AG is the president's main legal advisor and the country's chief law enforcer. An anti-nepotism law, later passed by Congress, bars officials from hiring relatives to work in the agency they oversee. On the firing side, President Jimmy Carter booted 4 cabinet secretaries all at once. President Richard Nixon demanded letters of resignation from his entire cabinet at the beginning of his second term, although he allowed most of them to stay. And President Donald Trump ejected his Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, and Attorney General Jeff Sessions, as well as wanted to fire Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller, but he could not do so directly. Here's another firing example. On May 7, 2017, President Trump informed FBI Director James Comey that he had been fired or removed from office. Trump believed Comey mishandled the investigations into Hillary Rodham Clinton's use of a private email server while she was Secretary of State. Comey believed she behaved irresponsibly, but there was not sufficient reason to charge her with a crime, but Trump disagreed with Comey. So, Trump fired Comey. It soon came out, however, that Trump probably had another reason to fire Comey. The FBI had started looking into efforts by the Russian government to interfere with the 2016 presidential election. The inquiry included possible communications between Russians and some of Trump's campaign staffers and family members. Trump thought it was a made-up story and thought Comey was not able to effectively lead the bureau. In addition to offices that require Senate confirmation, Congress has created more than 300 other positions that the president can fill without their approval, like the press secretary. The most important of these may be the National Security Advisor at NSA, who counsels the president on foreign policy. Unlike the Secretary of State, who also advises and carries out foreign policy, the NSA reports only to the president. NSA never has to explain or even reveal its actions to Congress or the public. For example, Nixon's NSA, Henry Kissinger, upheld U.S. policy with China by secretly arranging a meeting with Chairman Mao Tse-tung in Beijing in 1972. Their face-to-face talk was groundbreaking, but elected lawmakers had been left in the dark. So was Secretary of State William Rogers. These positions are just one way the executive branch has swelled since 1789. During Washington's 2 terms, Congress authorized 4 cabinet departments and a couple of hundred positions to staff them. Trump, on the other hand, oversaw 15 cabinet members, more than 100 federal agencies, and more than 3 million employees. Most work in the Department of Defense. Essentially, the Senate is charged with confirming or rejecting about 1,200 high-ranking officials once they are nominated. The president also appoints hundreds of others and can dismiss almost all of them. This arrangement gives modern-day presidents a lot of sway. So whenever you see a president fire a director or any official from a federal executive department without going through Congress, you now know it is because the framers did not explicitly outline that kind of provision for a president, as well as did not account for any politically motivated reasons to fire an official. This is another flaw in the checks and balances system, where it gives a restriction for one thing, but not another thing. So, how do other systems of government handle a unitary executive? Well, most states do not have a unitary executive. Top officials other than the governor are elected or appointed separately. So the governor does not hire and cannot fire them. This system has been called an unbundled executive. New Jersey is the only state whose governor appoints almost all executive offices. But even there, the governor cannot fire the attorney general. In Texas, the governor appoints only the Secretary of State. Voters select other offices, including the State Board of Education and the Railroad Commission. In 43 states, the people elect their attorney general. In 3 others, that person is elected by the state legislature. Tennessee's Supreme Court appoints its Attorney General. Only Alaska, Hawaii, New Hampshire, New Jersey, and Wyoming allow the governor to appoint that official. The lieutenant governor is like the vice president of a state, but while the president chooses their running mate, only 18 states allow the gubernatorial candidate to pick the lieutenant governor. In 17 states, the two positions are elected entirely separately. And in Tennessee and West Virginia, the legislators vote for the second in command. In other countries, heads of government and parliamentary systems, such as the Chancellor of Germany, have great power to hire and fire their cabinet ministers. Nevertheless, these heads have to negotiate with the ministers to put together and hold on to their government. These are how other places handle power on an executive branch level, but let's come back to the Senate. It barely has time to consider the large number of presidential nominees who are already under its control, let alone to ponder firing them. Besides, Congress is not responsible for constantly managing those federal officials, since it is the executive branch's role to do that. But the president's ability to dismiss any officers, especially directors, can be dangerous when we do not investigate the true motivations behind those firings. The number and importance of other presidential appointees within the White House has expanded. So Congress should have the authority to question them and hold them publicly accountable for their actions, just as it does with other high-level officers who are confirmed by the Senate. This is a way to improve the checks and balances system on the executive authority of the president. So we make it clear that a president cannot do anything they want and they are still held accountable for any decisions they make. In the next video, we will talk about continuity in government. Until then, please like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and turn on the post notifications so you will be notified when I post my next video. I appreciate your support. Remember, you are powerful, you are capable, and you are the changemaker our society needs. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you soon.